Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Baumgarten, and I expect you know that. And I want to welcome you to this discussion that we're about to have about the invisible victims of the coronavirus on Facebook Live, on Pal Talk, and on YouTube. And joining me now to talk about this is Andi Buerger, who owns or runs an organization called Beulah's Place that helps the victims of sex trafficking who are the invisible victims during the coronavirus. Before we start, Andi, I just want to say if you hear sirens and horns in the background, because the little girl next door, it's her ninth birthday.
Aww.
And the cops in this town, since the kids are stuck inside and they can't have a birthday party, they roll up and they sound their sirens and they play happy birthday through their PA system. And
That's great.
Is that a neat thing?
Very neat. If they're available in June in Oregon, let me know.
I'll send them your way in June because I don't know, we may still be locked down in June, Andi Buerger. So Andi, before we talk about what's going on with these poor folks who are forced into sex trafficking and how nobody's really looking out for them now very much. And I've researched this in anticipation of today's interview. A little bit about your background. I know you're an attorney, but you started out yourself as a victim, didn't you?
I did. Before there ever was a term called human trafficking, Gary, I was trafficked from 6 months to 17 years old by immediate family and extended family members. My birth mother was the primary sexual predator. And by the time I was 5, it was so bad, and the emotional, physical, mental, sexual abuses, everything going on. That was my first attempt at suicide. And obviously, I was not successful.
Thank God. Thank God.
In my life, God did intercede. But by the time I was 17, that was the last time my birth mother tried to end my life. So it was a very rough background.
Is this a common scenario? Because I've covered this a lot in my career, but I've never really understood the origins of this. Is this a common scenario that it's family that forces the children into sex trafficking?
Many times, I know the movies that we see, it's kind of snatch and grab or international or, the things that sell tickets. But in reality, a lot of times the victims are taken by somebody they know, somebody familiar, even if it's a fellow friend that's a student. But back in the 60s and early 70s, when I grew up, there was nothing out there. We didn't even talk about child abuse in those days. So, trying to tell somebody what happened in my home, we were basically very much mind controlled, that if we even tried to speak, our life would be ended. So yes, it is common for that to happen, even for generations.
Now, was she being controlled by a man to do this? I mean, it's against maternal instincts to do this kind of thing with your own daughter.
Well, you would think, but she did that to my birth brother as well. And here's what I do know, Gary, is that trafficking or any kind of perversion like that, there's either perversion driving it or greed. And we hear about the greed and the financial part of it because that's what's in the headlines. That's what, why gangs do it, why, other people that look normal, grab kids, or boyfriend takes a girlfriend to a party and the only people there are his friends that he sells her to. No one's going to say, hey, guess what happened to me tonight, right? The victims aren't going to do it. I didn't even become a statistic till I was 33 and I was in counseling, in a bad marriage. So yes, it is common. And we know, as you probably found out in your research, every single state has human trafficking in it, whether we want to accept that or not.
Right. And I understand that although there's a lot of places shut down right now, you can't get your hair done, you can't get your hair cut, you can't get your nails done, you can't buy a car in many states. But the sex trafficking, believe it or not, continues. People have these kinds of perversions, as you put it, and I think that's apt, especially if they if they have a taste for minor victims, children. They're going to find they don't care about the coronavirus. They're going to go out there and try to score somebody to be with. And these sex traffickers know this, and the police, they're stretched really thin doing other things right now. And I've talked to some police departments about this, and it's all anecdotal. I'm sure from my sense of what they're telling me, they're not going full tilt trying to protect children right now because they won't give me any statistics. And other times they probably would give me statistics. So that would suggest to me that they just don't have the staffing to really address this problem the way perhaps they have in the past.
Well, and as you know, statistics are based on reporting. And if we know for fact in statistics that 2 out of 6 girls, for example, are trafficked or violated or abused in some way, what it really is more like 3 or 4 out of 6, because it's all about what we can report. And if we can't catch them in the act, or if we can't break the rings up, although we've made great progress in the last few years, it's still a drop in the water right now. These predators are very stealth-like, and they like their product, so to speak, and they'll stop at nothing to get it.
So how are they able to operate in plain sight? Because obviously they aren't they, doing this in plain sight?
Yes, of course. Think about truck stops. Think about highways that used to be drug trafficking prevalent, and now it's human trafficking prevalent. Another way that a lot of these young people are transported, besides getting groomed by someone younger that they know may be taking them to a party, U-Hauls and moving vans and stopping at homeless shelters for the night, right? A predator may have 1 or 2 of his victims with him, and maybe they're stopping there for the night. It looks normal. The stories are probable, but if you're not trained or you don't know how to report or what to look for, it can be dangerous, and also they get away.
I've done reporting in the past about our nation's capital where children are disappearing at an alarming rate, and I think there are those in the community who are saying, and I would tend to agree, that unfortunately, if the child, as most often is the case in Washington, D.C., is Black, it doesn't seem to gain the attention of a white child that goes missing from perhaps Grosse Pointe, Michigan, or something like that, or Beverly Hills, California. And so the sex traffickers are able to, I don't know how they bring these children into their web, but they basically get away with it, and it doesn't usually get fully investigated, and the children oftentimes are never recovered.
Well, and all the cultural, I'm not sure about DC because I live in Oregon, but I know that all of our kids come from different backgrounds, whether it's Native American, Hispanic, whatever, and just the fact that they're abused and they choose the streets for safety because that's safer than what they're running from. That's what people don't understand. There's a reason they have chosen the street, because where they're at is either like what I grew up with, or it could be worse, it could be different, but it's so bad. They're going to take their chances on the street. And right now with the virus, they could be carriers. They won't even know if they're infected. They're not living in sanitary conditions. And honestly, they're not going to be able to walk into urgent care and say, hey, can you help me? I don't feel well. Whether they had insurance or not, which they don't, because they have no residential history. They don't have anyone to vouch for them. And a lot of people will write these kids off as, oh, you're just rebellious, or, you just want to couch surf, or you just want to live on the street, which is not true. The kids we rescue are not the ones that didn't get dad's car for the weekend, or they don't like mom's rules, or they don't like the way she cooks. These are the kids, they're smart. They just don't have anyone safe in their whole unit of life to help them navigate young adulthood, which is where we step in, because Beulah's Place makes them graduate high school, get a job, and maintain that job. And then we reintegrate them with community successfully.
How do you find them in order to save them?
A lot of times they'll reach out, schools, counselors, DHS, a lot of different organizations will say, hey, we noticed, or we have this young person, can you help them? So we've reduced suicide rates in the 18 to 21-year-old. And then last year we took a leap of faith and bought a building that's old, and we're renovating it so we can open up the first prototype for a community center dedicated to at-risk homeless teens, ages 14 to 19. We want to get to those kids before they take their life, before they become entrenched in criminal activity, because if they don't see hope, they're going to go wherever they have to go to get that meal, to get that bed to sleep in, to do whatever it takes just to survive, or they will die.
So the ones who don't die and who grow older, and when they are snatched or coerced at a young age, obviously they appeal to the taste of certain kinds of perverts, the pedophiles. But there comes a time when they're too old for that. So what happens to these children as they become young adults?
Well, that depends on if they have anyone to intercede, because as humans, we all have three choices: to do something, to do nothing, or to just do evil. And so with these kids, with these young people, if we don't get to them in that bracket of, 17, 18, 19 years old, where services stop, they will replicate what they came from, which means they'll become a predator at some point, or they'll be sucked back into a system of, well, this is all I'm worth. I may as well be a prostitute, or I may as well go back to my pimp, which happened to one of our gals recently because the overwhelming pressure of trying to be normal or trying to be helped was too much for her. But she knows we're here and we did what we could, but sometimes you don't win.
So Andi Buerger of Beulah's Place in Oregon, you obviously are an expert in this, unfortunately, because of your experience, and you know what to look for. But as we said in the beginning of our discussion, many of these activities occur in plain sight, right in front of us. We just don't recognize it, the rest of us in society. What are the warning signs that should tip us off? And once we recognize it, where do we go with that information?
Great question. I'm a firm believer in see something, say something. Somebody always knows when a child is being abused, whether they're trafficked or not. Someone always knows. Whether they have the courage to speak up is another thing. So here's the other part of that. Let's say you see maybe an older gentleman with a younger girl who's dressed maybe inappropriately for her age, or does not give you eye contact. I wouldn't give people eye contact. I didn't want anyone to talk to me, ask me questions. I just wanted to get through my day and pray to God that nothing else happened to me. So they would be very disenfranchised versus a dad and daughter that are maybe, familial and they're safe and they're going to go to coffee or to the park or whatever. So one of the things I encourage people to do is in your area, talk to the local law enforcement, find out what the parameters are on reporting so you can feel more comfortable about what to report. If you have a gut instinct, for example, if you see, somebody struggling in the car, a young person maybe trying to get out, get the license plate, call it in, say, look, I think there's trouble. Please go help, because maybe that will save that person's life. You never know. These predators, they'll troll schoolyards, they'll troll, places where kids will hang out. One incident, I actually saw a gentleman, he came through the parking lot 3 times, but he didn't seem to be looking for any one particular child. He was looking for the kids that were lined up waiting for mom or dad to pick them up. And if I hadn't seen that happen a few times, I would not have alerted somebody saying, look, do you know that person? Do you know that car? Nobody knew this person. And when he figured out we were onto him, he jetted out of that parking lot so fast. And that was back before I was really more schooled in what happens. So that's what happens.
I've noticed, again, through my reporting that oftentimes, and it may be a psychological thing, it may have to do with how we were raised, not to stick our nose into other people's business. I happen to be from Detroit, and you may remember on Animal Planet, the show Animal Cops Detroit. Well, when they first started, the animal police, the cruelty officers with the Michigan Humane Society in Detroit, they only had 2 cops doing it. And I was working for the all-news station in Detroit, WWJ, and I hooked up with these guys, and I went out with them. Mainly, I was interested in doing stories about pit bull fighting. They take these dogs and they force them to fight. It's horrible. But, of course, that's not all they did. They would have to handle complaints all the time about abused animals. And I can't tell you the number of times when I was riding with these fellas that we would come to a house where a dog maybe was chained to a short leash in the back of the house with no water, no protection from the elements. And the neighbor would come out, and I'd say to the neighbor, because I'm interested as a reporter, I would say, were you the one who called the Humane Society? Yes. And they would say, if you think that's bad, you should see how they're treating their children. And I would say, well, did you call protective services? Oh, no. So they feel comfortable calling on the dog, which I'm glad that they do, but people are afraid to call when it's a child. I think actually, Andi, it's a psychological barrier that we have based on how our society is structured to stick our nose in.
I would agree to that extent. Yeah, I'm almost 60 and I came from that same, you don't get anybody in trouble, you don't snitch, you don't say anything, you don't cause trouble in the neighborhood, whether they're too loud or they're beating their children, basically. But here's what I do know. 5 children a day die from child abuse in this country, and most of those children are under the age of 5. Those are validated statistics. We are killing our children, literally, sending them to ERs because we're too frustrated, we don't have time, whatever the reason is. But when it comes between an adult and a child, as you know, the adult has the ultimate responsibility to protect. And my feeling, of course, is as a national community, when we allow our children to be preyed upon, to be victimized, to be treated like chattel, to be treated like nothing, like they're not worth anything, that does not make us a civilized community. And we may never get rid of depraved behavior. That will happen. Unfortunately, it's running rampant, and it's on YouTube, it's on videos, it's on iChat. We don't know who we're talking to over the internet. And if we don't, then our children certainly don't. But again, that takes a community, whether it's a single parent family, a 2-parent, a grandma taking care of the extra kids. We have to work a little harder to protect the most valuable asset, because 10 to 1, most of the people that are on this streaming have a storage unit protecting their goods, or they know of a house or a school or a church that has a protective fence around it to protect what's important. But yet we're not willing to protect the most precious asset our country has, which is its future, our youth, whether it's younger kids, these teenagers that we have rescued, and my husband and I have had 16 live with us on and off of the many that we've rescued. They go on to college, they become renters and consumers, they have careers, they're having their own children. But this time around, it's going to be different in their life and in their generation, because we interceded. And we've been all volunteer driven for 11 years, just to say. And yet we have a 92% success rate without millions of dollars. Although if you want to write a check, I would take it.
Yeah, we're going to give you an opportunity to tell people how to do that. Marianne Hoynes, who is in our Facebook live stream audience, asked the question, do drugs play a role in this, or drug addiction?
In terms of what they're running from, a lot of times the parent or parents or guardian are drug addicts or are drug addicted. Our kids, for example, here's one story. We had a girl whose father was a community leader. He violated her sexually from ages like 5 to 10. The mother found out, divorces him. She becomes a raging alcoholic, gets another boyfriend who doesn't like children. So they left the girl from ages 12 to 16 home alone with just frozen food in the freezer so that the mother and boyfriend could go be together. The only time the mom came home was when the girl attempted suicide. So what do you think will happen during those years? They're going to find a place or a friend, right? Hey, come on over. I'll help you. You can try this. It'll make you feel good, right? And that's how this one girl got addicted. But fortunately, she reached out to us, and now she's just thriving as a career woman.
That's terrific. Well, look, you're a role model. You went through it, and you're an attorney, and helping all these children. So perhaps others will follow in your footsteps. Before we part company, Andi Buerger, people are interested in knowing how they can contribute to Beulah's Place.
That would be great. Financially or in resources, they can go to Beulah's Place, BEULAHS place.org, BeulahsPlace.org. They can donate directly. Every dollar goes to the programs. They can get information, including hotline numbers, in case they'd like to have that handy. And then also, my book called A Fragile Thread of Hope came out in October on Amazon.com, and 45% of the proceeds go back to victims of child abuse and sex trafficking. So that's an easy way for someone, to help just by buying a book or the Kindle version. And it has 4 stories of the kids that we rescued, as well as more of my stories. So it could be inspirational, even for someone who's gone through it and is now in their later years.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. You're a terrific interview. It's a very tough discussion, this one, but it's one that we have to have. And as you pointed out, it's only exacerbated right now during the coronavirus. So we have to be a little bit more vigilant. We have to be more vigilant anyway, but now even more so because of the coronavirus. And you brought up some really interesting points. People who have joined late, this will remain on Facebook. It'll be on YouTube, so you could go back and see the beginning of this interview. Andi Buerger, thank you very much for joining me today. And as I say at the end of all of our discussions, stay safe and peace out.
Thank you.